It started with the email. Rachel sent it on a Thursday afternoon. Subject line: family photo session, details. She peppered it with exclamation points, emojis, and Pinterest-worthy inspiration photos of perfectly coordinated families standing in fields of golden grass. I scrolled through the message, pausing when I saw it. Mom, can you wear something neutral? Beige or cream, maybe taupe. Just so everything feels soft and cohesive. Cohesive. That word sat like a stone in my stomach. Now, I'm no stranger to biting my tongue. I've done it for most of my life. When her father forgot our anniversary, when the PDA moms whispered about my off-brand purse, when Rachel told me I shouldn't laugh so loud at the baby shower because it throws off the vibe. But something about that beige request stuck in my craw. I've never been beige. I'm red lipstick and hoop earrings. I'm the woman who used to march into parent-teacher conferences in floral blazers and matching pumps because I believed a splash of color could make anything better. Beige. Beige is what you paint the walls of a house you plan to sell. Still, I obliged. I pulled out an old cashmere sweater the color of wet sand and paired it with my good khakis. I even smoothed my hair into one of those tidy chignons that Rachel says makes me look classy. I told myself, it's just a photo. Let her have her perfect little moment. The shoot was at McMillan Park, the one with the swan pond and those winding little paths we used to walk when Rachel was small. I got there 10 minutes early, like I always do. They were already taking pictures. Rachel stood with her husband, Greg, and their two girls, Lila and Sophie, posed like magazine models. Lila's hair was curled in big soft waves, and Sophie wore a flower crown I'm pretty sure cost more than my first prom dress. Even the dog had on a coordinated bandana. I stood off to the side, hands folded in front of me, watching the photographer, some artsy-looking kid with a man bun and a camera the size of a toaster, call out poses like a stage director. Okay, now everyone tickle Lila. Greg, kiss Rachel on the cheek. Sophie, throw your arms up like you're flying. They laughed. They twirled. They glowed. I waited. Finally, he turned to me. Let's get one with Grandma in the shot. Before I could even take a step forward, Rachel lifted a hand. Not rude. Exactly, just dismissive. Actually, let's get all the nuclear family shots first. We'll do one with Mom at the end. Nuclear family. That's what she called it. Like I was plutonium. I nodded, murmured something like, of course, and stepped back. They kept posing for another 45 minutes. Every angle, every combination. Rachel with each girl. Greg lifting Sophie onto his shoulders. Even the dog got a solo with a chalkboard sign that said, positively adorable. And then that was it. The photographer began packing up. Rachel was already on her phone, probably posting to Instagram. Greg gave me a distracted wave. Thanks for coming out, Mrs. Whitmore. Mrs. Whitmore. My own daughter's husband still couldn't call me by my first name. Rachel kissed me on the cheek, not quite meeting my eyes. Thanks, Mom. Hope the drive wasn't too much. The drive. 2 hours, round trip, in traffic. In beige. I walked back to my car, parked beneath a shedding oak tree, and sat there with my hands on the steering wheel for a long time. I didn't start the engine. I didn't cry. I just stared at my reflection in the rear-view mirror. My lipstick had faded. My sweater clung too tight to my shoulders. I looked like a woman who had become an afterthought. Back home, I didn't turn on the lights. I poured a glass of wine, cheap boxed, and sat on the couch in the dark, surrounded by the echo of every holiday meal, every science fair project, every time I stayed up sewing Halloween costumes, because Rachel had to be the only fourth grader with a handmade flamingo suit. I opened the photo album from the bottom drawer, the one I made by hand, back before everything went digital and disposable. I flipped through the pages. There I was, smiling with baby Rachel in my arms, holding her bike seat steady the day she learned to ride, clapping the loudest at her high school graduation. And now, apparently, I didn't fit the picture. So I made a decision. Quiet. Final. If they didn't want me in the frame, I'd stop posing. If they wanted me invisible, I'd disappear. But not the way they expected. Because if you've ever spent your life building a family only to be edited out of the story like a smudge on a lens, you know the hurt doesn't just sit quietly. It starts planning. And so did I. I didn't sleep much that night. The house was too quiet. Even the refrigerator seemed to hum with judgment, its low mechanical drone echoing in the silence. Around 3 a.m., I found myself standing in the hallway, barefoot, holding a photo I'd taken off the mantel. It was Rachel's 5th birthday. I had made the cake myself, double-layer chocolate with pink buttercream roses, because she'd insisted she needed real flowers, but edible. She had frosting on her nose and both hands in the air like she was catching happiness. I had loved that version of her. I still do. But I don't know where she went. I sat at the kitchen table until the sun came up. By then, I had made my decision. I called Velma. Velma Martin and I had been friends since the 6th grade, when I punched a boy for calling her a name I won't repeat. We lost touch for a while, life, husbands, distance, but we always found our way back. She was the only person I knew who still answered her landline. When her voice crackled through the receiver, warm and familiar, I nearly broke down. "Vel," I said, my voice thin, "do you have coffee?" She didn't ask questions, just said the strong kind, "Get over here." Her place was the same as it had always been, a little lopsided, a little loud, a little chaotic in a way that made you feel like you could exhale. She had laundry on the couch, dishes in the sink, and gospel music playing low on a dusty radio. I loved it instantly. We sat on her porch wrapped in old blankets, mugs warm in our hands, and I told her everything. The photos, the beige sweater, the way Rachel had said nuclear family, like I was some leftover radiation from a past life she'd rather forget. Velma didn't gasp or offer pity. She just looked at me, steady as stone, and said, "Well, I hope you brought real shoes, because you're not going back to that sad little cave you call a life." I laughed, the first real laugh I'd had in weeks. That afternoon, we drove to a little antique store outside town. It smelled like cedar and old perfume, and Velma walked through it like a general surveying her troops. She found me a second-hand desk, some velvet curtains, a vintage lamp shaped like a swan. "Every woman needs a corner," she said, "to write her own damn story." And that's what I did. I went back home that evening with a mission. I cleared out the cluttered guest room. Rachel had stayed there once a year, maybe, and made it mine. Not Mom's room, not storage space. Mine. I hung the curtains. I set up the desk. I found an old typewriter at a flea market the next weekend and started tapping out words I hadn't said out loud in decades. Not to anyone. Not even to myself. I wrote about being 19 and terrified, sitting in a Planned Parenthood waiting room with a positive test and no one to call. I wrote about my mother, about how she wore her sadness like a shawl and handed it down to me like a family heirloom. I wrote about Rachel's birth, about how her tiny fist reminded me that sometimes the world gives you a fight worth waking up for. I wrote about the years in between, the hard ones, the quiet ones, the ones no one ever puts in photo albums. And slowly, something shifted. I began to remember myself, not as someone's mother, not as someone's helper, as someone. The funny thing was, once I started standing up a little taller, the world started noticing. The woman at the library invited me to join her book club. The guy at the hardware store started giving me tips on refinishing old furniture. I wasn't beige anymore. I was visible. Still here. Still me. And that's when Rachel called. She hadn't reached out since the photo shoot. Not even a text. But suddenly, there she was on my screen. Caller ID lighting up like a ghost. I didn't answer, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone to include me. I was building something that didn't need anyone else's permission to matter. Rachel left a voicemail that evening. Her voice was chipper, clipped, trying too hard, like she wasn't sure if I was upset or just busy and didn't want to ask either way. "Hey, Mom. Just wanted to check in. The girls miss you. We were wondering if you'd want to come over for dinner Sunday. Let me know, okay?" The message ended with a click so final it felt like punctuation on an apology that never came. I didn't return the call. Instead, I looked at the calendar hanging by my fridge, an old one from a charity I'd donated 2 years ago, and saw that Sunday was circled in red. Family photos, still written in Rachel's careful handwriting. I stared at it for a moment, then walked over and tore the page clean off. I didn't have time for performative dinners. I was busy reinventing my life. By week 3 of my new writing routine, I had a rhythm. Mornings were for coffee and reflection, afternoons for errands and walks around the lake near Velma's house, and evenings were for the typewriter. The click-clack of those keys became a comfort, like an old friend talking back. I wrote about everything I had once believed didn't matter. Every burnt casserole, every missed birthday, every little dream I had let go of to hold up someone else's. And then I started writing letters. Not to Rachel, not yet. To myself. To the young version of me who stood in line at the grocery store with food stamps and a screaming baby, trying not to cry. To the tired version who drove 3 hours to attend Rachel's college graduation and wasn't invited to the dinner afterward. To the invisible version who sat in the back row at every school play, clapping louder than anyone and never getting a thank you. I told her I was proud of her. And then I started writing to other women, real ones, fictional ones, a mix of both. Women who gave and gave until they forgot they existed beyond their giving. I called it the out-of-frame letters. I didn't know what I would do with them yet, but they felt like something important. Like maybe, finally, I had something worth sharing. One Thursday morning, Velma called. Remember that old women's center downtown? The one that had that fundraiser last year? I said I did. Well, they're hosting a storytelling night. Open mic real stories. You should read one of your letters. I laughed. Vel, I haven't been on a stage since I was the back end of a donkey in the Christmas pageant. She didn't laugh. Exactly. Time to put yourself front and center. So I went. I wore a red blouse. Not beige. Not taupe. Red. The kind that makes you stand up a little straighter. The community center smelled like old books and lavender oil. There were about 30 women in the audience, all ages, shapes, colors, some holding mugs, some holding tissues, all of us holding something invisible but heavy. When it was my turn, I walked up to the microphone with a paper in my hand and my heart doing gymnastics in my chest. I read one of the letters, the one I'd written to the woman who got left off the family photo. And when I finished, there was silence. Not the awkward kind. The kind that holds weight. Then applause. Real. Full, shaking applause. Afterward, a woman with gray curls and a sunflower tattoo on her wrist came up to me. That was me, she said. Every word. That was my life. I smiled and took her hand. Then I guess we're not invisible anymore. That night, I went home, poured myself a glass of wine. This time the good stuff, not the box kind, and sat on my porch watching the stars come out one by one. I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Not just peace. Pride. I wasn't just someone's mother anymore. I was Margaret Whitmore. A woman with stories. A woman stepping back into the light. And the frame? Well, darling, I was building a whole new one. The week after the storytelling night, I received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a photograph. It was a candid shot, me at the microphone, red blouse catching the light, head slightly tilted as I read from the page. Someone had taken it that night without me knowing, and in it I looked alive. Not posed, not planned, just present. There was a note scribbled on the back. For the woman who reminded me, I still have something to say. Thank you. I held that photo for a long time. It felt like a kind of proof. Like the universe was whispering, you're not done yet. Velma, naturally, had ideas. Start a blog, she said over our usual Saturday breakfast of greasy diner hash browns and strong coffee. Women need to hear this stuff. And for heaven's sake, put your name on it. I balked at first. I didn't know the first thing about websites, and the idea of sharing my private thoughts with the whole internet felt like putting my soul in a fishbowl. But Velma doesn't believe in comfort zones. So one evening, after Googling how-to guides and watching 3 YouTube tutorials hosted by teenagers with ring lights, I started a blog. I called it Out of Frame. The first post was the letter I had read aloud at the community center. I hesitated before hitting publish, but once I did, it was like opening a door I didn't know I'd locked. The next morning, there were 3 comments. By the end of the week, there were hundreds. Women wrote things like, I've been beige my whole life. Thank you for reminding me I can be red. I haven't talked to my daughter in 2 years. Your story gave me the courage to try again. My family left me out of the holiday card this year. Your words made me feel seen. I answered every comment. Every single one. I didn't care if it took me all night. These women, my sisters in silence, deserved to be heard. And then came the email. From Rachel. Subject, coffee. Just that. One word. No punctuation. I stared at it for 10 full minutes. Then I closed my laptop and took a long walk. Down to the lake, around the weeping willows, past the little bakery that still had my favorite blueberry scones, even though I hadn't stepped inside in years. When I got home, I didn't answer right away. I needed to sit with the feeling, because for the first time, I had something Rachel didn't recognize. Boundaries. 2 days later, I replied, "Sure, but not at your house. Not at mine. Neutral ground. Somewhere with good pie." She agreed. Suggested a little cafe near her work. One of those places where everything comes on a wooden board, and the chairs are designed more for aesthetic than comfort. But it had pie, and neutral ground was what I needed. I wore navy blue, not beige, not red. Just the color I liked. Rachel was already there when I arrived, fiddling with her phone. She looked up, blinked like she hadn't expected me to actually show. "Hi, Mom." I smiled, sat down across from her, and folded my hands in my lap. "Hi, Rachel." There was a pause. Not awkward. Just full. "I read your blog," she said after a moment. "I didn't know you could write like that." "I didn't either," I said honestly. "I didn't realize you felt so," she trailed off, searching for a word. "Invisible? Forgotten? Excluded?" "Small," I offered. She nodded slowly. "Yeah." There was more silence. Then, with a breath so deep it looked like it hurt, she said, "I'm sorry, Mom." I didn't rush to forgive her. I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't. Not yet. But I reached across the table and touched her hand. "Thank you," I said. "That matters." And it did. It still does. That coffee wasn't a reset button. It wasn't a perfect reunion. But it was a beginning. And this time I was stepping into it with my eyes open, my spine straight, and my name on every word I spoke. Because I wasn't just back in the picture. I was holding the camera. I wasn't expecting the letter. Not an email, not a text. A real letter. The kind you open slowly, because it feels like it might carry more than just words. It arrived one morning tucked between grocery flyers and a coupon booklet for tire rotations. Pale blue envelope. Loopy handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. "Dear Ms. Whitmore, my name is Julia. I heard you speak at the community center a few weeks ago. I was sitting in the back, crying behind my scarf. You didn't see me, but I saw you. And something you said about being erased from your own life hit me so hard I had to sit in my car afterward just to breathe. I haven't spoken to my mother in 6 years. I don't even remember why we stopped. Your words made me want to try again. I called her. We cried. We're meeting next week. Thank you for reminding me that healing can start in the quiet. With gratitude, Julia M." I pressed the letter to my chest and sat at the kitchen table for a long while. I had never set out to be anyone's inspiration. I wasn't trying to start a movement. I was just trying to survive my own story. But now, somehow, I was helping others navigate theirs. Women like Julia. Women like me. The blog kept growing. So did the letters. So did the invitations. A woman named Carla invited me to speak at a women's conference in Savannah. A small publishing press reached out about turning the blog into a book. A podcast host named Tasha asked if I'd do an interview. At first, I said no to everything. Too much. Too fast. Too exposed. But Velma, ever the bulldozer of doubt, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Margaret, do not crawl back into the box they made for you just because you're scared of the light." So I said yes to all of it. I practiced my speech for Savannah in front of my bathroom mirror, then in front of Velma, then in front of the clerk at the hardware store when he asked why I kept mumbling to myself in aisle 3. The day of the conference, I stood backstage in a borrowed navy pantsuit and sensible flats, my stomach a mess of butterflies and leftover toast. The host introduced me as a voice for the forgotten, the overlooked, the women who built the world from the background. I stepped onto the stage to polite applause and blinking lights and felt a wave of calm I didn't expect. I used to think that being invisible was just part of getting older, I began. like bad knees and hot flashes. I thought fading into the background was what happened when your children grew up, when the world decided you'd already had your moment. But I was wrong. I didn't fade. I was pushed. And then I told them the story. All of it. The beige sweater. The photographer. The phrase, nuclear family, said with a smile like a slap. And I told them what came next. The writing. The rediscovery. The rebuilding. When I finished, the room was silent. Then came a sound like rain, a slow rising applause. Afterward, women lined up to talk to me. Some hugged me. Some cried. Some just squeezed my hand with such ferocity it took my breath away. But the one that caught me most was a woman about my age. Silver streak in her hair and fire in her eyes. They put me in the kitchen at my daughter's wedding, she said. Said the photos were for her side of the family. I haven't told anyone that until now. I hugged her. Because there are thousands of us. Mothers, daughters, women quietly erased in the name of aesthetics, of pride, of convenience. But we are not gone. We are just stepping back into focus. By the time fall rolled around, the leaves in Charleston had begun their slow, graceful dive toward the ground. Red and orange like tiny rebellions scattered across sidewalks. I found myself wandering downtown more often, not for errands, but for air, for thinking, for seeing something outside the four walls of the life I used to know. One crisp afternoon, I passed by a small art gallery tucked between a juice bar and a high-end pet boutique. It wasn't flashy. No neon, no signs yelling for attention. Just a sandwich board on the sidewalk with scrawled chalk letters. Every woman has a frame. Community portrait series, now showing. Something about it tugged at me. I pushed open the door, the bell overhead jingling like a wind chime. The gallery smelled like paint and eucalyptus. Soft music played and sunlight poured in through high windows, casting long golden shadows across the floor. The walls were lined with portraits, photographs, paintings, mixed media pieces. Women of all ages, backgrounds, expressions. Laughing, crying, serene, wild-eyed. And there, near the back, was a portrait that stopped me cold. It wasn't me, but it could have been. An older woman in a bold red dress, standing on a porch, one hand on her hip, the other holding a paintbrush. Her eyes were sharp, defiant, alive. I read the plaque beside it. Marguerite, age 67, stepped back into the frame of her own story. I stood in front of it for a long time. The gallery attendant must have noticed because she approached quietly, her voice gentle. She came to one of our workshops, hadn't painted in years, said she used to make murals before she had kids, before everything. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The attendant smiled. She said it felt like meeting herself again. That night, I wrote a new blog post. Not a letter, not a story, a manifesto. To the women standing outside the lens, step in. Step in with your grief, your rage, your wisdom, your wrinkles, your joys. Step in with your tired eyes and your still burning heart. We are not too old. We are not too late. We are not too much. We are the frame. It went viral. I don't say that to brag. I say it because I couldn't believe it myself. Comments poured in. Messages. Articles. Even a local reporter wanted to do a story. And then came the call. Rachel again. This time she sounded different. Hushed. Unsure. She'd seen the blog. Read the post. Mom, she said. Everyone at work is talking about it. I didn't even realize it was you until someone said your name out loud. I didn't know. There was a pause. I didn't know you were hurting that much. I let the silence hang between us. For once, I didn't rush to fill it. I wanted her to feel it. To know what silence feels like when you're on the other end. She continued, slower now. Lila asked me yesterday why you weren't in any of the pictures around the house. She asked if something happened. That's when the tears came, not hers. Mine. Quiet, sharp, cleansing. She misses you, Rachel said. We all do. I think maybe I do too. I took a breath, steady and full. I'm not the woman you put in the background anymore, Rachel. If you want me in your life, it won't be from the shadows. There was another pause. Then, I know, and I'm sorry. She didn't ask for more than I could give. That was new. Later that week, An envelope arrived in the mail. No note, just a photo. Rachel and the girls standing on the porch of their house, holding a handmade sign, "We're saving your seat." And just like that, the frame widened. The invitation came on thick cream cardstock, embossed lettering, gold foil edges. Rachel had spared no detail. "Family brunch," it read. "Come as you are." And beneath it, in her handwriting, just like when she was a child labeling her school folders, "We mean it this time." I sat holding that envelope like it might dissolve in my hands if I blinked. Velma raised an eyebrow when I told her. "You gonna go?" she asked, stirring sugar into her coffee like it was a decision too. "I don't know," I said, honest for once. "What if it's just another beige sweater moment?" She leaned across the table, lowered her voice. "Then you wear red again. You bring your fire. You don't wait for them to make room. You be the room." So that Sunday morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I got dressed like I had somewhere to be. Not in beige, not in navy, in emerald green, flowy, strong, and soft at once. I pulled my hair back with the tortoiseshell clip I used to wear when Rachel was still small enough to think it made me look like a queen. The drive to her house was familiar and foreign all at once. The streets had changed. The new houses with their identical mailboxes and manicured lawns all blurred into one another. But the knot in my stomach, that was very familiar. When I parked, I sat in the car for a full minute before getting out. The door opened before I knocked. It was Sophie. She let out a squeal, the kind only little girls can get away with, and flung herself into my arms like I'd never left. "Grandma, you're here," Mom said. "Maybe you wouldn't come, but I said she has to because you promised to teach me how to make peach cobbler, and I told Lila you do the crust by hand." Her voice tumbled out, warm and fast and sticky sweet, and just like that, the ice began to crack. Rachel appeared behind her, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Hey, Mom," she said. Her voice was different, not careful, just real. Inside, the house looked mostly the same, sleek, curated, more for show than living. But there was something new, too. On the entry table, nestled among a vase of eucalyptus and a stack of design books, was a photo frame. Inside it, me and Rachel, from when she was 8, her arms wrapped around my neck, our hair messy from the wind at the county fair. She caught me looking. Sophie found that in an old album. Asked why there weren't more. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Brunch was awkward at first, like new shoes that still need breaking in. But gradually, the air loosened. Rachel refilled my coffee without being asked. Greg complimented my dress. The girls peppered me with questions about everything from my favorite movie to what a cassette tape was. It was just a meal, but it was also a mending. Afterward, as we stood on the porch, Rachel handed me a small package. I got you something." Inside was a leather-bound notebook, emerald like my dress, with gold-stamped lettering. "Out of frame. Stories by Margaret Whitmore." My heart thudded in my chest. "Rachel, I haven't finished the book yet." She smiled. "Then start here." That night, I sat at my desk, the one Velma helped me pick out, and opened the notebook. I ran my fingers across the smooth paper and wrote the first sentence. I once stood outside the picture, waiting to be seen. Now I write the whole damn album. I never intended to become an author. When you spend decades folding other people's laundry, putting your own dreams on hangers in the back of the closet, you forget you had anything to say in the first place. But sitting at that desk with the emerald notebook, something poured out of me I didn't know was still alive. The stories came fast and raw. Not just the pain, though there was plenty of that, but the humor, too. The time Rachel cut her own bangs with safety scissors and blamed the dog. The way I used to sing along to Motown records while scrubbing the bathtub, because it made even bleach feel like a little bit of joy. I wrote about the invisible years, the ones no one ever asks about. Velma read every chapter. She marked the margins with yes, and this one made me cry, and one simply, "Lord, this part is a sermon." We decided to self-publish, not for profit, not for vanity, for permanence, for proof. The day the first box of printed copies arrived, I was alone. I opened it with kitchen scissors, hands trembling like it was a treasure chest. There, in black and white, was my name on the cover. Margaret Whitmore. I sat on the floor, cross-legged, and stared at that little book like it might float. Then I laughed, because there I was, every version of me captured in pages. Not erased, not cropped. Seen. Rachel called later that week. "The girls want to read your book," she said, almost shy. "I mean the lighter parts. Is that okay?" I smiled. "Of course. Just skip the chapter where I curse about your prom dress." We both laughed. Really laughed. It wasn't the laugh of people pretending everything had always been fine. It was the laugh of women who knew what it meant to come undone and find each other again, piece by piece. A week later, Rachel invited me to her book club. "I know it's mostly women your age," she added quickly, "but I think they'd get a lot out of it. You don't have to come, I'll be there," I said. And I was. I walked into that beautifully curated living room. Floral pillows, flickering candles, wine glasses arranged just so, and I wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. The women were warm, curious, some cautious at first, but by the second glass of Merlot, they were quoting lines from the book like scripture. One of them, a stylish brunette named Elise, leaned forward and said, "Your writing reminded me of my mother. She passed a few years ago. I wish she'd had the words to say what she did." I reached for her hand. She probably did. Sometimes we just need someone else to speak first. When the night ended, Rachel walked me to my car. She paused before I opened the door. "Mom," she said, "I think for a long time I wanted to create this perfect version of life. A picture that looked right. But it didn't feel right. And I didn't know why." She swallowed. "I left you out of the frame because I thought that was how the picture worked. I was wrong. I didn't say I told you so. I just opened the car door, looked at her, and said, I know. Because I did. Forgiveness doesn't always come with a ribbon. Sometimes it's just a woman standing by your car at 10 p.m., admitting she finally sees the portrait you've been painting all along." Thanksgiving came that year with a different kind of chill in the air, not from the weather, but from anticipation. I hadn't been to Rachel's house for a holiday in nearly 3 years. The last one ended with me quietly washing dishes while everyone else gathered around the dessert table laughing at jokes I didn't understand. Inside jokes built on years I'd spent just outside the edge of their lives. But this time felt different. She called me 2 weeks before. "We want you here. Really here. Not just helping in the kitchen." I almost laughed. "You know I make the best stuffing." "Then make the stuffing," she said. "But also bring the stories." The stories. That's what they were calling them now. My writing, my letters, the bits and pieces I'd scribbled over the years and finally published. The girls had even started calling me the famous grandma. I brought the stuffing and a new copy of my book, freshly bound, with a note inside for each of them. When I walked through the front door, Lila and Sophie ran to me like they were still 6 and 4, instead of nearly teenagers with earbuds and opinions. Greg gave me a hug. Not the awkward one-armed kind, but a real one, like maybe he'd finally figured out what I meant to this family. The house was warm. It smelled like cinnamon and gravy and the sharp sweetness of cranberry sauce. But more than that, it felt full. Not of noise or obligation, but intention. People had made space for each other here. For me, dinner was beautiful. Candles flickered. Plates clinked. And before anyone could cut into the pumpkin pie, Rachel stood up. "I'd like to do something," she said. "Something new." She walked over to the side table and picked up a photo album. The old kind, with plastic sleeves and yellowing edges. "It's from when I was little," she explained. "I found it in a bin in the attic. Most of these photos don't even have labels." She flipped it open to a page with a photo I hadn't seen in decades. Me, holding baby Rachel on our tiny front porch, my hair frizzy from the humidity. Her smile gummy and wild. "No one took better pictures than you, Mom," Rachel said, her voice trembling just slightly. "Not the photos themselves. The moments. You caught them. You made them happen." She set the album on the table and looked around the room. I realized I've been making a new album for years, but I left out the best parts. I want to fix that. Then she reached under the table and pulled out a wrapped box. Inside it was a new photo album. Handmade, leather-bound, the kind you buy from a boutique with soft cream pages and gold trim. The front cover read, "Out of frame, our real family album. I want you to help us fill it, she said. Not just with photos, with stories, with the stuff we forgot to honor. There was a silence around the table. Not heavy, sacred. I reached for her hand and held it tight. Only if I get to write the captions, I said. Everyone laughed, even Greg. After dessert, the girls sat on the rug and flipped through both albums, old and new. Lila pointed to a picture of Rachel as a teenager, scowling in a too-tight prom dress. Was she always so dramatic? Worse, I said, and the room erupted in laughter. We stayed late, talked long, the kind of conversation that doesn't check the clock. And as I got ready to leave, Rachel walked me to the door again. This time, there were no apologies. No trying to fix something broken, because nothing was broken now. We had just found the frame that fit. Spring came early to Charleston that year, like it was eager for something new to begin. The dogwoods bloomed before Easter, their petals soft and full like they'd been saving themselves for this moment. I walked each morning beneath their gentle shade, my breath curling in the last cool bites of morning air, feeling a strange sense of ease settle in my bones. Not peace, not exactly, but something close. Like steadiness, like home. My book, Out of Frame, was in its second printing. Book clubs were reaching out. Podcasts. A small independent bookstore in Asheville invited me for a reading, said they'd set up folding chairs and offer sweet tea. I said yes. I was saying yes a lot these days. Then, one soft Tuesday morning, Rachel called. We're doing another family photo, she said. Just like that. No exclamation point. No tightness in her tone. Just words, simple and clear. Oh, I asked, folding a sheet from the clothesline, the scent of sun and lavender clinging to the cotton. I've been thinking. The girls are older now, and I want something that reflects who we are. All of us. I held the phone between shoulder and cheek and waited. No beige, she added. No themes. Just people. I smiled. Are you sure you don't want a color palette? She laughed. Mom. A pause. I want you in the center, she said. Where you belong. I blinked. The sheet slipped from my fingers. And I want Velma there too. Now it was her turn to be quiet. Velma. She's family, I said. She helped me remember who I was when the rest of the world told me to sit down and hush. Rachel didn't question it. She just said, okay. We met that Sunday at McMillan Park, the same park where this whole story started. The sky was clear, the sun soft and golden like honey on toast. I wore deep red again, a shade somewhere between garnet and defiance. Velma wore royal blue with wide-legged pants and earrings shaped like sunbursts. She looked like she owned the sky. Rachel arrived in linen and sandals, hair loose around her shoulders, her makeup soft. No sharp edges, just her. The girls wore mismatched dresses, Lila in teal, Sophie in yellow. Greg even managed a crisp blazer and brown loafers that didn't scream corporate retreat. The photographer, a young woman named Nikki with a nose ring and a calm presence, smiled as she set up her camera on a patch of grass near the willow trees. Let's start with everyone, she said. Whole family. The phrase didn't feel heavy this time. It felt true. I stood awkwardly at first, unsure where to place my hands. Then Rachel stepped behind me and gently guided me forward. Front and center, please. Velma stood beside me, hand on my shoulder like she had every right to be there. Because she did. The girls pressed in on either side of me. Greg leaned in close to Rachel. Someone cracked a joke. Velma, probably, and we all burst out laughing. The shutter clicked right as my head tipped back. The laugh caught mid-sound. My hand curled protectively around Sophie's. Later, Nikki showed us the proofs on her camera screen. One image made us all stop. There we were. Real. My eyes weren't perfect. Someone's hair was blowing wild. Greg's tie was crooked. But the joy, the unpolished, unfiltered, unmistakable joy was right there. Rachel turned to me. That's the one. I nodded, but I didn't speak. My heart was too full, stretched like the roots of those trees, deep and wide and grateful. The photo arrived 2 weeks later. A large print, framed in dark walnut, with a handwritten card from Nikki. You have the kind of family people dream about. Messy, beautiful, real. I hung it in my living room, just above the mantel. The same spot where that beige sweater used to hang, limp and symbolic. Now there was only color. Now there was presence. And every night when I pass by that photo to turn off the lights, I see her, that version of me I almost lost. Standing tall, smiling full, with people on either side who finally understood her worth. It took me a lifetime to get into the frame. But now, darling, I own it.